taught to help people in distress.
Summer is usually associated with freedom, long days, warm nights, road trips, and leaving your windows open to catch a breeze. But the thing about letting the outside world in is that you never quite know what or who might come in with it. The following stories are reminders that sometimes the most terrifying moments happen when we feel the safest. Here are 5 true scary stories from this summer. Story 1. This goes back to when I was very young, probably 2nd or 3rd grade. Memories from that age are usually like a blur of static, but this particular night is etched into my brain in high definition. It was a school day, and it had been raining relentlessly since the morning, just a heavy, gray downpour that turned the sky dark by mid-afternoon. My parents had some sort of upscale obligation that evening, a gala, or a fundraiser. I can't recall exactly. The plan was for them to drive into the city, make an appearance, and be back late that same night. But, as the evening progressed, the weather turned from bad to severe. The roads were flooding, and visibility was 0. They called the house phone around 7 p.m., sounding guilty, telling me they had to stay at a friend's house, closer to the venue, because the highways were just too dangerous. My mom went through the standard safety checklist: lock the door, close the blinds, keep a light on. At 8 years old, I didn't feel fear. I felt freedom. Being home alone meant I could eat junk food and fall asleep on the couch watching cartoons. Sound of heavy rain and distant thunder. I stayed downstairs, glued to the TV, planning to pull an all, but eventually, the sugar crash hit, and I passed out on the living room sofa. I woke up hours later. The house was pitch black, save for the standby light on the television. The first thing I noticed wasn't a sound, but a feeling. It was freezing. I know temperatures drop at night, especially during storms, but this was different. The air in the living room felt thin and icy, like someone had left a freezer door open. I shivered, pulling my blanket tighter, and remembered my mom's list. I knew if they came home and found out I hadn't checked the locks, I'd be in trouble. So, fighting the urge to stay warm, I got up to do my rounds. I checked the front door. Locked. I checked the back slider. Locked. I went window to window, pressing my hand against the glass to ensure they were sealed tight. Everything was secure. I chalked the cold up to the storm, knocking out the furnace pilot light or something. I was too tired to investigate further, so I headed upstairs to my bedroom. My room faced the backyard, and up there, the storm sounded violent. Rain was lashing against the glass like gravel. I climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin, but I couldn't drift off. I started hearing something over the sound of the rain. It was a subtle creaking sound, wood shifting under weight. My bedroom floor was carpeted, so it wasn't coming from where I was walking. At first, I told myself it was just the house settling, or the wind buffering the siding, but the rhythm was too deliberate. Creak ... pause ... creak. I lay there, eyes wide open in the dark, trying to pinpoint the source. A flash of lightning lit up the room for a fraction of a second. My eyes darted to the closet. The room plunged back into darkness. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. I waited for the next flash. Lightning struck again. In that split second of illumination, my stomach dropped. The closet door was open. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had closed it. I always closed it, because the dark gap scared me. But now, it was ajar by about 6 inches. I didn't scream. I didn't gasp. A primal instinct just took over. I slid out of bed, moving as silently as a ghost, and tiptoed out of the room. I crept down the stairs, my breathing shallow, and scrambled under the large oak dining room table. I pulled my knees to my chest and wrapped my arms around myself. Finally, letting the tears come, I sat there in the dark for what felt like hours, listening. Then, I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, uncoordinated footsteps coming down the stairs. It didn't sound like a normal walk. It sounded like someone stumbling, almost pinballing off the walls. The steps moved across the foyer and into the dining room. They were getting closer to the table. I stopped breathing. I pressed my hand over my mouth. From under the tablecloth, I saw them. 2 bare feet entered my field of vision. They were caked in mud, the skin a sickly, jaundiced yellow color. The legs were covered in scratches. Deep red lines like this person had been running through thorn bushes. The intruder stood there, swaying. Then, something dropped from their hand. Sound of heavy metal clattering on wood. A heavy, rusty wrench hit the hardwood floor with a deafening clank. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the person to bend down and pick it up. If they did, they would see me. But they didn't. The feet just stood there, motionless, for an eternity. Finally, the feet turned. The intruder shambled away, walking into the kitchen, Then the living room. I heard the front door unlock, open, and slam shut. I didn't move until sunrise. I never told my parents. I was terrified they would blame me for not locking the house properly, even though I had. It wasn't until I was an adult that I finally told them. We never found out who it was, or how they got in. But looking back, the scariest part wasn't the weapon. It was the fact that while I was downstairs checking the locks, he was already inside, waiting in my closet. Story to this experience spanned several years of my childhood, starting around age 6 and ending when I was about 10. It centered around a recurring nightmare, or what I thought was a nightmare. The dream always started the same way. I would be lying in my bed, but I wasn't looking through my own eyes. I was floating near the ceiling, looking down at my sleeping body, like a security camera feed. It was a dissociative, out-of-body feeling that always made me panic. In the dream, I was lucid enough to know I was asleep, but I couldn't wake up. I would look around my room from this vantage point and notice things were wrong. The red numbers on my digital alarm clock would be counting backward. Then, I'd notice drawings taped to the walls, crude crayon sketches of stick figures holding hands, standing in front of a house with a blue roof. I never drew, so these pictures felt alien and intrusive. Then, the compulsion would hit. In the dream, I would feel a magnetic pull to look at my bedroom window. Every single time, a man would be there. He was pressed right up against the glass. He had short graying hair and a distinct, jagged scar running down his left temple. He wouldn't scream or bang on the glass. He would just watch me sleep. Then, slowly, he would start scratching at the pane with his fingernails. That sound usually woke me up. I'd bolt upright, sweating, and check the window. Nothing. No man. No scratches. After the 4th time this happened, I told my parents. They gave me the usual comforting speech. It's just a bad dream. You're safe. We're right down the hall. My dad even took me outside the next morning to show me there were no footprints in the flower bed. The dreams stopped for about 6 months, and I started to forget about them. But then, one night, it returned. Same floating sensation, same backward clock, same strange drawings. But this time, the dread was heavier. From the ceiling, I looked at the window, and my blood ran cold. The window wasn't just being watched. It was open. The terror in the dream was paralyzing. I could feel cold air rushing into the room. I tried to scream, to wake my sleeping body up, but I was frozen. I watched the man with the scar place a hand on the sill, preparing to climb in. I woke up gasping for air. I was in full sleep paralysis for the first few minutes, my mind screaming at me to move. When I finally broke free, I sprinted to the window. It was locked at. I started trying to game the nightmare. Before bed, I would tell myself, if you see the man, don't be scared. Surprisingly, it worked. The next few times I had the dream, the fear was duller. I became desensitized to his face. A year later, I brought it up to my parents again. I was older now, more articulate. I described the man in detail, the gray hair, the deep-set eyes, and specifically, the jagged scar on his temple. My dad's face went pale. He looked at my mom, a silent communication passing between them. A scar on his temple. My dad asked, his voice tight. Yes, I said, like a cut from a car accident or something. My parents sat me down. They told me that when I was a toddler too young to remember, a close friend of my dad's, named Brian, used to babysit me. He was around constantly, but they had a massive falling out. My dad wouldn't specify why. Only that Brian was dangerous and was forbidden from ever seeing our family again. The chilling detail. Brian had been in a bad wreck years prior. He had a prominent scar on his left temple. My dad theorized that my brain was processing repressed memories of this man I used to trust. It made sense. In a way, I tried to let it go, but the final incident happened when I was 10. I woke up from the dream, sat up, and looked at the window out of habit. Outside. In the moonlight, a shadow moved. It wasn't a dream. I saw a figure duck below the windowsill. I screamed, waking the whole house. My dad ran outside with a baseball bat, while my mom called 911. They never found anyone that night. But the next morning, my dad found them. In the soft mud directly beneath my window, there were fresh boot prints. It wasn't a dream. I saw a figure duck below the windowsill. I screamed, waking the whole house. My dad ran outside with a baseball bat, while my mom called 911. They never found anyone that night. But the next morning, my dad found them. In the soft mud directly beneath my window, there were fresh boot prints. My dad tried to hide it from me, claiming it was just an animal, but I heard him talking to the police. The footprints were facing the house. Whoever it was had been standing there for a long time. I never had the dream again after that night. But sometimes I wonder, were those first few years just dreams? Or was my subconscious trying to alert me to the fact that Brian had found us, and he was watching me sleep long before I ever saw him? Story 3. This happened a few years ago, on the very last day of 8th grade. It's a day that should be filled with relief and excitement. But for me, it ended in a police report. My middle school was massive, over 1,000 kids. On the last day, yearbooks were distributed, and the chaos of signing began. Teachers couldn't control the crowds, so books were just passed around from desk to desk, room to room. You'd get your book back with 50 signatures from people you barely knew. I got home that afternoon and started flipping through the pages, reading the funny notes and hags. Have a great summer message. I turned to the back page and stopped. There was a large signature from a kid I recognized, but had never spoken to. Samuel Robinson 3. Beneath his photo, he had written a message in thick black ink. I know where you live. I know where you sleep. We are going to be best friends forever. I stared at it, a cold prickle running down my neck. I knew of Samuel. He was the quiet, slightly odd kid who sat in the back of the cafeteria, but I didn't think he even knew my name. I tried to brush it off as an edgy joke, a weird attempt at being funny. That night, I had 3 friends over: Kevin, David, and Kieran. We were celebrating the start of summer with a basement sleepover Call of Duty. Doritos, the works. My parents were asleep 2 floors up, so we were being loud, feeling safe in our suburban bubble. Around 2 a.m., we were taking a break, messing around on my dad's rowing machine. Suddenly, a sound cut through our laughter. Knock. Knock, knock. It came from the storm door that led directly into the basement from the backyard. We froze. The knocking was rhythmic. Calm Kieran, trying to be the tough guy, shouted, "Who's there?" I wanted to punch him. Now, whoever was out there knew exactly where we were. Silence hung in the air for a solid 10 seconds. Then, a voice muffled by the glass replied, "Come around to the back door." It was a high-pitched, cheerful voice. It didn't sound like an adult. It sounded like a teenager trying to sound friendly. My friends, fueled by adrenaline and stupidity, wanted to check it out. They pressured me into going upstairs to the main-level kitchen, which had a glass sliding door to the backyard. We crept up the stairs in the dark. I peered through the sliding glass door. Under the yellow glow of the porch light, a figure was standing there, smiling. It was Samuel. My stomach turned. "Don't open it," I whispered to my friends. "That's the kid from the yearbook." Samuel saw us. He waved, his smile stretching a little too wide. He motioned for me to come to the window, next to the door. Against my better judgment, I cracked the window an inch. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "How do you know where I live?" Samuel's smile didn't falter. "I've always watched you. I knew we'd be good friends." "Go away," David said from behind me. "You're a creep. Leave or we're calling the cops." Samuel's face changed instantly. The smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure, animalistic rage. His eyes went wide, and he lunged at the window. "I hope you die," he screamed, spitting as he yelled. "I hope all of you die." He shoved his fingers into the crack of the window, trying to pry it open. I slammed it shut and locked it just as he started pounding on the glass with both fists, snarling like a wild dog. My parents came thundering down the stairs, woken by the screaming. As soon as the patio light flooded the yard, Samuel bolted, disappearing into the dark woods behind our house. The next morning, my parents called the school. The principal sounded horrified. He told us that Samuel had been expelled 3 weeks prior for violent behavior. He wasn't even supposed to be on campus the day yearbooks were signed. He had snuck in specifically to find my book. We never found out how he got my address. To this day, I check the locks on my basement door 3 times before I go to sleep. Story 4. This happened when I was 22. I had just graduated college and moved back in with my parents to save money. I was living a quiet, routine life. So when my college friend Lindsay invited a group of us to her family's beach house for a weekend, I jumped at the chance. Lindsay's family was wealthy neurosurgeon. I expected a nice house, but when we pulled into the driveway, I was floored. It was an ultra-modern architectural marvel. It looked less like a home and more like a glass box sitting on the dunes. The entire ocean-facing side of the house was floor-to-ceiling windows. We spent the day on the beach, and that night, we decided to have a slumber party in the main living room. The view was incredible, nothing but the moon reflecting off the black ocean. But as night settled in, that beautiful glass wall started to feel different. When it's dark outside and bright inside, windows turn into mirrors. You can't see out, but everything outside can see in. We were drinking wine and talking around 1 a.m. Lindsay got up to go to the kitchen to refill the chip bowl. She froze halfway there. "Did you guys hear that?" she whispered. We all went silent. Sound of gentle tapping on glass. It was a soft tap. It sounded like a ring hitting the glass. "It's probably just a bug or a bird," Thea said, though she didn't look convinced. We tried to ignore it. A few minutes later, Lindsay turned off the main living room lights so we could see the stars. As our eyes adjusted to the darkness, the reflection on the glass disappeared, and we could finally see the deck outside. I wish we had left the lights on. Standing on the deck, maybe 3 feet from the glass, was a person. He was dressed entirely in black, wearing a ski mask. He wasn't trying to break in. He was just standing there, holding a phone up, filming us. I screamed. The figure didn't run. He just slowly lowered the phone and tilted his head. Lindsay scrambled for the security panel, hitting the panic button. A piercing alarm began to blare, and floodlights bathed the deck in blinding white light. The man stepped back, raised a hand in a mocking wave, and then casually vaulted over the railing, disappearing into the dunes. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They found footprints in the sand leading all the way from the public beach access to our deck. But the scariest part wasn't that he was there. It was what the police found when they checked the perimeter, were smudge marks and nose prints on the glass of the downstairs guest bedroom, the room we had originally planned to sleep in before we decided to camp out in the living room. He had been watching us for hours, waiting for us to go to sleep. Story 5. I work as a long-haul trucker. It's a lonely job, but I've always enjoyed the solitude. You see a lot of strange things on the interstate at 3 a.m., but usually, it's just drunk drivers or weird wildlife. Last July, I was driving through a desolate stretch of Nevada, miles from civilization. No streetlights, just my high beams cutting through the desert blackness. I saw a car pulled over on the shoulder ahead. Hazard lights were blinking. As I got closer, I saw a woman standing by the driver's side door, waving her arms frantically. She looked terrified. Now, company policy says we aren't supposed to stop for hitchhikers, but this looked like an emergency. I slowed my rig down and pulled onto the shoulder about 50 yards ahead of her. I grabbed my flashlight and hopped out. "Do you need help, ma'am?" I shouted, walking toward her. She didn't answer. She just kept waving me over, pointing at her car. I got within 10 feet of her when something felt wrong. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking past me, toward the desert scrub, and she wasn't crying. She was smiling, a wide, unnatural smile that didn't reach her eyes. I stopped walking. "Ma'am." Suddenly, the hazard lights on her car turned off. The desert plunged into total darkness. From the darkness behind her car, I heard the distinct sound of heavy boots crunching on gravel. "Multiple people. Get him." A male voice hissed from the shadows. My blood turned to ice. It was an ambush. I didn't think. I spun around and sprinted back to my truck. I heard footsteps pounding the pavement behind me, gaining ground. I scrambled up into the cab, slammed the door, and locked it just as a fist hammered against the metal. I threw the truck into gear and floored it. In my side mirror, my taillights illuminated 3 men standing in the middle of the road, holding tire irons and bats. The woman was standing with them, her face devoid of any emotion. I didn't stop driving until I was 2 states away. I reported it to the highway patrol, but I never heard if they caught them. I don't stop for anyone anymore.